We are going back to the world of ERP implementations. Systems today are cloud-focused, and companies are trying to figure out how to get there before vendors force their hand. And many already are. Back in episode 8, we talked with Joseph Gress from Orca Bay. He took on an ERP implementation himself, acting as project manager, analyst, developer, implementer, and trainer. You can click in the upper right corner to see that episode. While it's becoming easier to fully internalize these efforts, not everyone or every company has that luxury or have complexities and scale in the organization that require a broader team. We have invited Angie Whittington from Model Home Interiors to the show to talk about her successful journey moving from an aged on-prem system to Microsoft Business Central in the cloud. Stay tuned to hear her insights, lessons learned, and strategies for making an ERP rollout smooth and successful. Don't go anywhere. So in 2006, you joined a company that didn't have any formal system in place.
Just an accounting system.
Okay.
You'd be shocked at how many people there were that were still hanging on, like sort of ducked the whole Y2K thing. Like it almost convinced them, look, see, I was right. I shouldn't have bought a system after all.
I'm Brick Tamlin. People seem to like me because I am polite and I'm rarely late.
Yeah.
No, honest to God, like we worked with people well into the early 2000s that were moving from a very manual, virtually paper. Might, as Angie said, maybe we got GP in there for keep track of GLAR AP.
Yeah, only accounting and like their purchasing went through it.
Where'd you come before? So what were you coming from when you, at the time you joined the company?
So I was working more in a company that I was running the reports and SQL. So my background was more like databases. And then naturally, I've always been a IT troubleshooter. So I was doing
NAV background, or this is the first
no,
time?
Never. 2006 was the first I've seen NAV, but
Okay.
that was SQL. You know, that's object oriented. So for me, it was in the same wheelhouse.
So beyond the engineer at the partner, how else did you educate yourself on the product?
Honestly, that was all. I mean, 2006, there wasn't that huge community world like there is now to learn everything. So it was just, I side saddled that engineer for sure, because in 2006, you know, they're always on site. We weren't in that remote world.
How big was that team that you were dealing with? Like you mentioned the engineer that you kind of partnered up with, but did they have a deep bench for this project?
And really, it was like a primary engineer. And ironically, for our latest system in Business Central, that wound up being really one single main engineer that stuck with us the whole time too, as well as like a developer. We were able to maintain the same developer.
Okay. And how big was your company back in 2006?
We were probably about 130 people.
Started in 2006. You had 130 employees. They were just on a basic accounting system. The concept of ERP was foreign. You were thrown in the deep end of the pool. You helped educate yourself. You partnered up with the partner because relationships matter in projects of this that come with high stress and asking everybody with day jobs to participate. So now you fast forward all these years later, how has the company grown? At what point, how big was the company at the time you decided we were going to go to the cloud with Business Central?
Well, I'll tell you, it wasn't necessarily the reason we went to cloud wasn't based on company size and the future of that, other than we knew we needed an efficient system. The reason to move forward on an updated system was Microsoft doesn't let you keep running old systems forever, right? But the technology was outdated and wasn't a secure platform. So it was finally the push that we had to. And I feel like we got lucky in terms of like the timing. Because if we would have been maybe like a year earlier and we finally had the push technology-wise, we would have been like on premises. And in my opinion, that would have been more costly because we would have been on
and you'd have been stuck longer. You'd have been stuck longer.
Yeah. So
I love that you mentioned security too, because I look at today's approach to system management implementations. It's not just a single path. It's not just a single thread. It's about the whole stack. Does Nav work for you? The old 4.0? Of course it does. Now you have the Microsoft gentle nudge to get to the cloud. The reality is that you're just not going to wake up and all of a sudden the system stops working. It's on-prem, you own it. But you mentioned security. Nav 4.0 isn't going to work on these modern OSs.
Yeah.
I think that's more the push
Exactly.
of all, is that, you introduce a new server edition because the security atmosphere that we're in demands it. Now all of a sudden Nav 4.0 doesn't work. So it is a much broader conversation.
So talk a little bit about how you evaluated what you liked about your existing nav and how you were going to do things different with your reimplementation.
So I think it was more about managing the project. So what we had wound up learning was we need to go as close to out of the box as possible, right? Because in 2006, when we implemented, we made so many changes. We had so many employees that were our power user group that we had a lot of people chiming in. No, you can't do this. You got to do it this way. What about this one-off instance, right? So in that aspect, in the new system implementation, we narrowed down our team. So our power users were a smaller team. One person that knew the business process of their department, and they were the ones that we conferred with.
So let's talk about your power user identification. So you already made a decision that it was time to go to BC. It wasn't based on company size per se, but there were some factors like the Microsoft support of the underlying OS and just security in general. So there are a variety of reasons, and you made that conscious decision. And like I said before, you were thrown into the deep end of the pool. You picked up the reins, understood the business process, and so you have all that going for you for this second go round. But with your power user identification, what was the criteria of the individuals for them to make the team?
So that was kind of an interesting thing. We're still a relatively flat business, so we don't have a lot of people in each of those departments. Purchasing is really only 4 deep, where one being the most senior. So we took really the most senior person. So ironically, almost everyone that was in our latest power user group was in the original in 2006. So
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was pretty good because they had kind of that background of, oh, I know how this is going to go. There's going to be testing. There's going to be process discussions. And
did they have the appetite? Because I know, seniority, of course, they have the most tribal knowledge. But it sounds like they also had the appetite to take this on again, because they have some have PTSD when it comes to projects like this.
I'd say for sure. I wouldn't say that anyone was signing up and first in line to do it, but they knew it had to be done. And between ownership, with the VP, he gave all those power users like the capacity, right? Let's prioritize what your goal is. You got to support the system. We'll get through it. If the VP kind of said, if any of you are struggling as in power users to get like your tasks done, your testing, your training manuals, then come see me and we'll get through it, right? So
you had the power users create the training manual?
Yeah, we did. And that was huge.
Woo, Angie, check you out.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
I think it's really important. And I think that was one of the things that led to success, but also like their kind of ownership of the system too. And now you're able to train your team, even though it's a small team, right? And so because when we go live, guess where your team's coming to? You. And guess all the workload you're doing, all of the workload, because you didn't train your team, right? So we kind of pushed it that way and pushed it back on them and got them to do the work for us.
And another point that was drawn out that's important for those tuning in as to how to ensure a smooth system implementation is that you had support from the very top.
That was huge.
people didn't feel like they're on their own island. So when you have your executives saying, look, if you need additional time or capacity to focus on this project, you come see me, we'll make it happen. That's an important thing. It has to have full-time executive support, not just one or two, because people will sniff out the naysayer. They're looking for an audience as to why we shouldn't be fully committed or I can't do this. But when you're unified at the very top, it makes for a much better process.
And on that point, that's one thing we learned from the previous implementation. We definitely still had some people that would have maybe tainted the pool a little bit. And
You
some
always do.
naysayers. So we didn't include those very much in our, we kind of sandbagged those folks a little bit.
Why don't you get the f*** out of here?
And that was on purpose because we learned what difficulty and time they cost us in the original project.
And so talk about their experience after the go live. These people that you said, okay, we're gonna tamp that down a little bit, right? So we're gonna take the naysayers, we're gonna be nice to them, but we're gonna move on without them and have a come along conversation later.
Yeah, that's what we did.
Talk about how that went.
Yeah, we got pretty close to a mock go live before we brought in the couple other people that were important roles to learn and share with the rest of the team. But I think what really supported us was that leadership. AP says, listen, this is the way it is. This is how it's going to go. There's not really a go back. There's not a stopping point. We're moving forward. So get on the ship and let's go.
Yeah, it really helps set the tone. It's an acknowledgement that, and there's acknowledgement there that this isn't going to be all, joy and ease. Trying to think of my words here.
But the fact is, human beings don't like change. And if without executive support, there are some personalities, typically long-term employees, that will try to make a position for why now is not the right time.
Right.
Right? Like,
Yeah. I mean, we definitely heard this is the way we've always done it. Why can't we keep doing it this way? And,
Right.
that's just costly for an application design.
And that's why if you have 5 executives, you need to have 5 champions, not 4. It has to be unified front because sharks smell blood in the water, and you just want to minimize that. You want to eliminate that, not minimize. You want to eliminate that.
Me being like the PM, that was one of the other huge benefits of the system was our partner. They weren't talking to all of our power users. They're directly communicating to me. So we're making an efficient communication link, right? Let's get the job done, discuss the task. Then I take that information, go back to our power users, communicate on a level that works for them, and then we get the job done. I coordinate back to the partner, to the engineer, and get the work. So that saved us a ton of time, right?
And that's another point, right? We're checking off a lot of points here, the keys to success, and having the strength of an internal PM. This is not the partner's exclusive job. Partners typically bring a PM if they're, in my opinion, worth their salt. They have dedicated PMs, not these shared hats. I'm your analyst, I'm your PM, I'm your developer. Just think of the time savings I'm going to give you. That's a red flag to me. That says you're going to be hemorrhaging cash and, jack of all trades, master of none. So dedicated PM on the partner side, critical. Internal PM champion, very important. And I love how you described it.
Yeah.
I mean, in one sense, listening to you, you're like, well, we've created a silo from partner to the client, but there's a benefit there if you have a strong PM, which you are. You're able to disseminate that down in their language. You can translate the tech talk that might be coming from the partner, or the partner's coming from a position of ignorance. I know that sounds awful, but they don't know your business, your process. You do. So translating information coming from the partner, you're able to spread that around. The other thing I love hearing is that the team respected you.
Yeah.
And we can't minimize that. There's got to be good chemistry and culture. Otherwise, it's just going to be constant friction, constant sandpaper. You just you want to avoid that.
Angie, I do have a question though, because just a slightly different perspective. And Tony, you mentioned a partner that has a dedicated PM or a dedicated business analyst or whatever, right? But we're seeing more and more customers that are they're saying, hey, I've got an Angie. I've maybe got two people to support Angie. And I don't think I want this partner overhead. How did the PM get involved, and how did you either redirect how the partner was going to do it? Or you see where I'm going with that question?
So it's a funny thing. I mean, that role still pivotal to me, working directly with the project manager, because for me, like, I'm going to continue as the IT director of our company. My role was to continue running the system. I need to know all the business processes, but syncing with the engineer constantly, I'm able to learn so much more about the system. And if I can understand the system more, how it works out of the box, then I team up with my power users and show the options that we have to say, oh, well, we can do it this way instead. We don't need to do it that way. We've been doing it for 15, 16 years. This is close to out of the box. And then when you think about the role of like the project manager on the partner side, really, they were just someone kind of, I felt like for us, kind of checking the list. Like, hey, we're running a good timeline here. It's looking good. They were kind of the checker. Are you guys doing okay? Are you happy where we're at right now? Do you have any problems we need to resolve, right?
And that's what you're hearing from that partner. What should be happening behind the scenes too is that they're kind of cracking the whip on the devs and the analysts on their side, while on the other side of the fence, sanity checking how you're doing, how your team is doing, because there's accountability on both sides that we got to make sure we're keeping each other motivated and that ball keeps moving forward.
Yeah, you're right. I did hear that from the other side. They're definitely doing that on the partner side, syncing with their team. So I'm on my side as the user in the business. I'm syncing with my team and they're doing the same. So it really was a good partnership.
Another point that was brought up was out of the box thinking. I call it aspirational. I think it's a great starting point, but I find that it stays aspirational. I mean, you may end up with 50 mods, but without that disciplined mindset kind of setting the tone, you could have 500 mods, right? And being able to challenge the status quo and so documenting the business processes. You mentioned that too. So we all are on the same page as what makes your business unique and what are some things that transcend all businesses.
Yeah, for sure. That's what we wound up talking to the partner. That was when we were kind of vetting partners. That was one of the big things we brought up is, listen, this is our intentions. And are you going to be a partner that pushes back for us and says, maybe you don't need to do it that way. Let me show you how you can accomplish what you need, your task out of the box.
So Tom and I have a deep history. And when Tom was in the partner channel and I'm the customer, he was I always say what I loved about Tom's approach was he wasn't afraid to tell me no. The customer is always right.
Afraid. I was a little bit afraid.
But the customer's always right. Bullshit. I get. Who came up with that phrase? A customer. So it's you want someone that's not afraid to give you the hard truth, and so partner selection is critical. We don't want yes people. We want someone who will challenge us constructively. You can that pendulum can swing the other way too, where you just have straight up asshole partner, right? You don't want that. But you want someone that actively listens, takes the time to digest and understand your business process, and can challenge. Now, you being the dedicated PM, kind of that communication conduit, is great, but there's going to be direct partner communication with other team members in your organization. So do they have good bedside manner? Are they not robotic? If they come in just box checking because they have all these other customers that they're working on projects too, that doesn't go so well. Was there a budget and timeline expectation, and did you meet it? Did you beat it? Did you exceed it?
We had an idea of, okay, here's what we're thinking in terms of cost. So we were happy with what they came in at, estimated originally. And timeline, we were actually kind of floating on our timeline. For us, we could move it, right? The goal wasn't to have little downtime, but for us, we could move the timeline. It wasn't critical that it had to be a certain month. They had given us an estimate and really pushed on us, like, well, when would you want to go live? You know, if the system wasn't ready and we weren't where we want it to be, we were okay pushing. So
How long did your project run till go live?
So we kicked off in February and then we went live December. So
Yeah,
we
that's
were happy
pretty
with
solid.
that time.
10 months. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's solid.
And we had some add-ons too. Like we had to incorporate barcode printers, handheld scanners. So it wasn't just the basic system. So having those add-ons was a big difference too.
I like that it wasn't so militant on timeline and budget. You know, the difficult leadership team is one that just treats system implementation like they're expanding their warehouse. You know, they understand that, okay, these walls are erected and we put in the plumbing and, you know.
Look, there's sometimes acquisitions, some kind of contract end where you will physically lose access to your system, right? But in most cases, that is not going to happen. The system was running your business yesterday. It's going to run your business tomorrow. And it's far better to get it right, especially in a SaaS solution, because if you get it right, you probably don't have to do this again, right? We just get to improve what we have because the base is always going to be current. And so why get hung up? I mean, we all need to have an expectation for the work we're going to get done, but I'm kind of with Angie. I think timelines should float a bit and we go when we're ready to go.
Oh, that's uniform. We couldn't be more aligned. The path I was going down is don't allow the trap to happen. That if the timeline slips or the budget increases, that you somehow failed. You've better to get it right, not fast. These are complex projects. This is not a warehouse expansion. This is you learn things as you go. And typically those lessons, just because you didn't catch them in the beginning when you formulated the project plan, doesn't mean somehow we missed something. I mean, clearly, I guess there's cases where you miss something, but as you get into the system and are testing, new things surface. A new process improvement idea arises and it's worth the conversation. It's worth a little bit more spend. You just have a more polished, finished product.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd say that was 100% true for us. And we definitely, we learned that from the first project. And that's probably the biggest thing that any company customer needs to take away from projects is learning from it and implementing it on the next project. Whether it's a tiny project or a huge implementation, it's like, if you don't take what you learned from the previous project, you're going to be catching the same pitfalls.
Right.
Yeah. And Tom, you've done hundreds of these. So do you typically, I always refer to the pad game, 6 months, $100,000. We're going to say 12 months, $250,000. Like how's the sausage made when it comes to planning engagements like this on the partner side?
Well, okay. So here's the trap on the partner side. So if Angie's my consultant and Tony's my developer and we're building a project plan and there's a project manager between us, Tony's going to give the project manager a number. Now, Tony doesn't want to get in trouble, so he padded his number a little bit, but he's going to give it to the project manager, who's also going to pad it a little bit because they're afraid that the salesperson is going to. And then the salesperson doesn't want to get in trouble with Angie, so they're going to pad it a little bit. And so now I've got a number that's potentially somewhere around 40% inflated just because everybody's so afraid of going over budget. And honest to God, that's a trap that happens all over the place. Now, the flip side, you mentioned ignorant partners, and I think that's the proper term, frankly. If you look, and Microsoft's gotten them thousands of things right in the last 10 years in particular. However, there are lots and lots. If you go with the marketing material only, there are lots and lots of managed service partners who are now attempting to sell Business Central that have no idea what they're getting into. And so while these systems are way easier to implement than they used to be by an order of magnitude, these are still big systems. And just because you can install it doesn't mean you can figure out how to run it properly.
I would say I think our numbers probably were padded by the partner, but we were very happy with overall. I mean, we didn't do an assessment as did we go over budget, did we go over timeline, because it was almost from the beginning of the project and what was laid out in our documentation compared to where we got to the end. It was like you really couldn't compare the two. I wouldn't say
because you adapted throughout the project.
Yeah, exactly. And then
I like that.
And we tweaked things. Yeah, we tweaked those things on purpose because it was, give a little here, you get a little extra on the other hand. So it was tweaking, and we were happy to do that.
We just had this conversation with a customer. We're like, look, we're building up an IT team. The customer didn't really have one before, and so we're building a team up as we do this project. But the trap that many, certainly younger consultants run into. But look, as an IT team, we're not making decisions. We're going to present to our steering committee some options, pros and cons maybe, and we might make a recommendation, but the organization's making a decision, right? Because I think that many times you get caught, well, Angie, what should we do? And then Angie decides. And then Tony, 6 months later, is going, well, that was, right? And so, we want to make sure that it's a team approach. I mean, Angie, the way you laid it out just sounds like a really well executed plan on the client side.
I would add, and as we're talking through this, I think there's wisdom in saying, I don't know sometimes.
Well, I got to be the smartest guy in the room there.
Well, because, really, it's... I think back to our episode right here with Joseph Gress on ERP DIY, the first conversation. Now, this is kind of an anomaly, but I respect the hell out of it when he was asked, well, how long is this going to take? He's like, well, I don't know, but we should get started, and then we'll start answering as we go. And the owner, the CIO, was like, okay, that's fair. I find that to be back to when you're starting to vet a partner. If they come in and with certainty, well, it's going to take this, and this is how it's like.
Tony, we were in a call yesterday. They're like, are we going live in May? I'm like, I have no idea. We don't even know if we got all the scope yet. If you can give me the rest of the requirements, then I'd be happy to try to let the spreadsheet do a calculation and tell us if May is feasible.
These are complex systems with so many unknowns and factors. And like we started this episode with, it's not just the system implementation. There's a security element to it. There's an infrastructure element to it. Just because you're in the cloud doesn't mean there's not an infrastructure conversation, because you have to manage those resources up there. Otherwise, they can flex up and you're hemorrhaging cash. So you got to be smart about it. And there's the change management. There's all these pieces that come together. And sometimes that lands with, I don't know, but we will get there. You got to have a directional approach. Tom, you mentioned this in the past. I love it. You start out with a Gantt chart, a waterfall, just to get a sense. Sure, there's going to be a little bit of pattern there, but the expectation up front is this is what we this is what we know in the moment. Directionally, this feels right, but then it's an agile approach as we go, and the goalposts are going to move.
Yeah, definitely with that. And that was part of our focus, was like pushing on the core business processes. So we knew if we could get those core business processes aligned and doing the business and running through successfully, then we could go live with that and then continue to work on those other little add-ins like AP automation or expense management, or for us, we had some inventory processing that needs to be done.
And that's our final point, right? The concept of an MVP, a minimum viable product. Have your core covered. We talk about the 3 pillars. Can I take an order? Can I ship an order? Can I collect cash? If you're doing those 3 things, you're going to be okay. So you launch with that. To your point, Angie, you go live, and then we can start hyper-focusing on optimization. And is there an add-on that can help automate some things? Because if you try to boil the ocean, you just don't launch.
And sometimes you can't really figure out what to optimize until people are using the system.
Oh my God, what a great comment. Yeah.
Yeah, we found the same thing. That's a big...
Angie, thanks for taking the time this morning. Great conversation, and I hope it helps our listeners understand that, yes, you can ensure a smooth transition to a new system if you have the right process and the right team in place. Thanks again.
Take care, everybody. Thanks, Angie.
Great conversation, and I hope it helps our listeners understand that, yes, you can ensure a smooth business transfer. And it helps our users understand that, yes, you can ensure a smooth transition. And just for phonetic clarity, Angie Whittington.
Yep, you got
Does
it.
that sound right?
Uh-huh.
All right.
Good job.
Okay. Look, this isn't going to be all, joy and ease. Trying to think of my words here. I think this will turn out really well.
Very good.
Hey, thanks for waking up early.
Yeah, I had to get up, get ready, tell the kids not to bother me, get
Right.
off to school.
I did the same thing. I thought I was running late. I swear to you, I was buttoning my shirt as the camera's turning on. I'm like,
and then this mic, man, this bullshit mic. Sometimes it just doesn't want to cooperate,
We told Angie it was your first time. It's okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I said you were trying to make me feel good. You're like, oh, she's a newbie. Let me make it.
That's right.
Yeah, that worked. Yeah.
Yeah, it did.